All right, well, here we are in study 8 of Colossians. We're going to be looking at chapter 2, verse 6 to 10. And let's answer the questions from chapter 2, verse 1 to 5 first. So question 1, Paul says that he toils / labors and struggles / strives in the power of Christ that people would believe in and grow in the gospel of Christ in chapter 1, verse 29. Even though he hasn't seen the Colossian believers, he struggles and strives for them as well. The word here in chapter 1, verse 29 and chapter 2, verse 1, to this idea of struggling and striving, is where we get the word agonise from. So his great longing, his great agony, and his goal is this. Number one, or first of all, that their hearts would be growing in encouragement and deep united love for one another, which would lead to their minds growing in rich confidence and understanding as they grasp more and more of the knowledge of God's mystery, that is Christ. Just to explain that a little bit more, Paul wants them to be full of joy and enthusiasm, full of love and unity, full of confidence and assurance in Christ, full of understanding and knowledge of God in Christ. Christ was the source of all wisdom and knowledge. He wanted them to be focused in on and full of Christ. Now, this is important because, as chapter 2, verse 4 hints, there are false teachers who are urging the Colossian believers into Gnosticism, which taught that there was a secret knowledge only they could give the Colossians, which would be necessary for salvation and growth. And Paul is saying, focus in on and be filled in Christ. Question 2 then, Paul rejoiced to hear that in spite of the Gnostics and their false message, the Colossian believers were standing strong in the truth. So then we move on to study 8, chapter 2, verse 6 to 10. For the rest of the chapter 2, Paul is getting into the details of what the Gnostics were teaching and how the Colossian believers were to respond. So question 1, the Colossian believers received Christ by faith, according to chapter 1, verse 4 and verse 6. How were they to continue in him? Chapter 2, verse 6 to 7. And there are 3 metaphors in these verses, you'll notice. Question 2, what were the false teachers using to try and take the Colossian believers captive in chapter 2, verse 8? Question 3, who is Christ in chapter 2, verse 9 and 10b? And question 4, who are we in Christ in chapter 2, verse 10a? God bless.